8th grade. Today in Algebra 1 we're taking a look at Cumulative Test 9b. Mr. Shane's going to do the work right here on this page. All you got to do is follow along and apply the skills that he's talking about to solve the problems with me as we work through it. Number 1 says find the greatest common factor of 12x to the third y to the fourth z squared plus 8x squared y to the fifth z. And it gives us a little indication right here what we should do as our strategy. It says write the prime factorization for both terms. To do that, we write them out in the most simple form of them actually being multiplied together. So 12 can be written as 2 times 2 times 3, and then we write out each variable individually. X to the third is x, y to the fourth, y times y times y times y, and z times z. Plus, separate those two to the first term and second term. Keep those separate. 8 is 2 times 2 times 2. X squared is xx, y to the fifth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and z, z, z. Now I'm looking to find what is common in the first term and the second term. I've got two 2's. Those two things can be put back together. 2 times 2 is 4, so that can become my leading coefficient. Here, the number of x's that I have has to be the same. The least amount here is 2, so I can only take 2 from this first term. That was going to turn into x squared. I take them apart with this prime factorization, and I put them back together for that common factor. Y, there's 4 of them and 5 of them, so we can only take 4 from those. Y to the fourth, 2 z's, z squared. There's my greatest common factor between those two terms. Number 2, a square patio has a side length of 11n. If it's a square, each of those sides is the exact same. So if you're finding the area, what's the area of the patio, you multiply those two things together. So this would be 11n times 11n. Multiply the numbers by the numbers and the variables by the variables. 11 times 11 is going to give you 121. N times n is n squared, and that's in terms of feet as our unit. Number 3, to determine the slope of the given line, use slope formula. Now you got to look really carefully at this because technically this point, because these are in increments of 2, is not 1, -4. It's actually 2, -4. That'll throw you off if you use that 1 as your calculation. What I like to do is take those 2 points, -2, 2, and 2, -4, and write those out as an order pair here. And then I use my little chart. XY indicates where those items are, and then I put a little 1 here and a 2 here to tell me which ones are x1, x2, y2, and y1 so that I can convert it into this type of calculation. Here's how it works. y2 minus y1 will look like this. -4 minus 2. Just move that here, move that there, set it up in this formula. x2 then is down here, which is 2 minus 2. 2 minus -2, and now I can do that math. -4 and minus 2, same sign sum, it's going to give me -6. 2 minus 2, two negatives make a positive. 2 plus 2 is going to give me 4. If I reduce that, both divisible by 2, it's going to give me -3/2. Another way to do it would be to simply draw my rise and run. This goes up 2, 4, 6, and it goes over 2, 4, which obviously was the same as the -6, 4. Goes down 6 over 4, rise and run. It's negative because it's going down from that left to right direction. Number 4 says translate the sentence below into an inequality. The sum of 4 and the number is less than 15. When we're translating from sentences to inequalities, we look for two things: what the inequality is and what the operations are. In this case, it says the sum of 4 and a number. That means 4 plus something. A number can be written in as a variable. I'm going to use n. Is less than points to the left, and then it's less than 15. Fill in the blank. Number 5, simplify the expression. A squared over b times, in parentheses, 2a over b plus b cubed over ac. The distributive property is used here, and we use our property of exponents once we get to that multiplication point. You multiply the first term here by what's the first term in the parentheses, and this what's outside by the second term in the parentheses, and then write those two things together. So here's what it would look like. A squared 2a over b plus a squared over b times b to the third ac. Now I can use my properties of exponents to simplify. Anytime I have two exponents that are the same in the same portion, numerator and denominator, I can put those together with the product property of exponents. So this is a squared and a to the first. That's going to give me a to the third. I'm going to use the leading coefficient, so I put the 2 out in front. A cubed here. In the denominator then, b and b would be put together to be b squared. That's my first term. Plus in the second term, I've got a squared in the numerator and a in the denominator. What do I do there? B cubed in the numerator and b in the denominator. The product property was used here. This is going to be the division property because you can divide these, or in the terms of how those exponents work, you subtract technically those points. So 2 minus 1 is going to leave you with an a in the numerator. You'd have a here. 3 minus 1 is going to leave you with b squared in the numerator, and then c would be the only thing that's left on here because both of these would be canceled out by that subtraction. Then you have to think, okay, what are the possible terms in the denominator that cannot equal 0, because you can't have 0 in the denominator? A can equal 0, b can equal 0, and c cannot equal 0. Number 6, another property of exponents, in this case a negative exponent. It says 1 divided by 4n to the negative 4th power. Well, our little rule tells us that if something is negative in the denominator, it's positive in the numerator. So I'm going to flip that and turn n to the 4th into my answer. It's positive in the numerator if it's negative in the denominator. Number 7, simplify 6xy squared plus 5x squared y minus 3yx squared minus 3y squared x. To simplify this, I got to find like terms. What I like to do is circle or highlight or underline the terms that I know are alike, and then I can combine those with the leading coefficient out in front. So xy squared, that's one right here, xy squared. Even though it's written in a different order, it's still the same set of variables. And 5x squared y, this is 5x squared y, and x squared y, those two things can be put together. So 6xy squared minus 3xy squared, 6 minus 3 is going to be 3. That's xy squared. And then I've got negative 5x squared y minus 3yx squared. It's two negatives. We're going to keep that minus sign. Put those same things together. 5 and 3, you would subtract those two. This is, sorry, that's a positive. I almost thought that that was a negative. That's a positive. So you would subtract those two. 5 minus 3 is going to give you 2. And you've got x squared y. Number 8. 1/8 times 17n times 8. Use the commutative property. If I move this 1/8 over here, my number sense makes this a lot easier because I would know that these two things would actually just cancel each other and become 1. If they cancel each other and they become 1, then 17n times 1 is just 17n. So because I commuted it, I moved it from one place to another so that it can be multiplied. To simplify it, I'm actually able to solve that without thinking about how would this multiplication and that multiplication work. Commutative property allows me to move those things because those operations of multiply don't matter which one comes first. They're all going to be multiplied. Number 9 says, a train travels at a constant speed as shown in the table. What is the rate of change? Here we're calculating slope, but this is the first way that we learned it. Rate of change in terms of what's the difference between the two variables that they present us. We've got to pick these 2 points and then subtract to find the difference. Here it tells us to put the change of distance in the numerator. Let's take 2 of these examples, 280 and 140, and subtract those. 280 minus 140, it's going to be 0, 4, and 1. That goes in my numerator. 140. Change in time, 4 to 2. 4 minus 2 is 2. What's 140 divided by 2? Looks like 70, and that's miles per hour. MPH or M over HR, either way that you'd write that, miles over hours, that works both ways. Every 2 hours, they're going 140 miles. That means every hour, they go 70 more miles. Number 10. Richard earns $10.50 per hour at his summer job. He worked a total of 275 hours over the summer. If 40% of the money he earned was put in his savings account, how much was put into the savings account? First, we got to find the total, and then we find 40% of that. So we would multiply $10.50 times 275 and take that multiplied by 40%. So here's your calculation. What I would do with this percentage is turn that into a decimal when you're multiplying. 10.5 times 275 and multiply that by 0.4. You'll get your answer. That one you don't get for free from Mr. Shane. You have to put in some work. Number 11 on the back side. The figures below are similar. Find letter X. Here you've got 3 and 2, and 3 is going to be compared to X because they're on the same side. They're in that kind of congruence, that same position, and 2 is compared to 3. So I can write this as a proportion. I write the same two items on the same set of fractions. So 3 is to 2 as x is to 3. And I set those equal to each other as a proportion because we say that they're similar. Now we can multiply and find this value by cross-multiplying and dividing. You've got this just 2x. 3 times 3 is 9. Divide by 2, divide by 2. You'd have 9 divided by 2. If you divide 9 by 2, you get 4.5 or 4.5 feet if we're using feet as our unit of measurement. Number 12, determine the value for which the rational expression 6d minus 4 divided by d plus 2 is undefined. Find the d value that makes the denominator equal to 0. What we do in this case is we look at that denominator, we write it out as its own expression, and we set it equal to 0. Now we solve for d because this is where we want it to not equal. So to get d by itself, I would subtract 2, subtract 2. If d equals negative 2, what happens? Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. Can't have that. So we say that d cannot equal negative 2. 13. Company created the graph to show its profits each year. Explain why the graph may be misleading. Well, it looks like since 2002 to 2007, this company is losing money. That doesn't look good overall. So what do they do? They make these huge increments of $50,000 in terms of their profits, and they have these gigantic increments. That makes all of these kind of shrink, so it looks like, well, they went from 150,000 to a little over 100,000, but showing that you lost thousands of dollars during that time. Probably want to hide that information because you don't want it to be kind of known either to your company, to your shareholders, to your boss, that, hey, here's what's going on with our profit margins. They're shrinking. That means bad things are happening. Maybe it's because of the economy or just bad business practice. Those large increments do what? They make the values appear closer together, so it looks like, well, they lost a little bit of money, but it's actually thousands and thousands of dollars. That's not good for business. So it makes them closer together, which is kind of misleading. 14. It says, provide a counterexample for the following statement. If a student likes football, then he's on the football team. Well, not everybody who likes football has to play football, so a student who likes football but doesn't play would be an example. 15. 2/3 equals y minus 7 divided by 9. Solve for y. To do this, it asks you to cross multiply. So my multiplication would look like this and this. I'd have 2 times 9, which is 18. The other form would be 3 multiplied by y minus 7. I would distribute, so it would look like this. 3y minus 3 times 7 is 21. Here's how I would calculate this. I'm solving for y. To get y by itself, I would add 21, add 21. 18 and 21 is 9. 1 and 2 is 3. 39 and 3y divided by 3 divided by 3. What is 39 divided by 3? I won't give you that one. I'll make you do the math on that. 16. Negative 5x equals 3x plus 16. Solve for x. If you've got two variables that are the same on different sides of the equation, you need to get them on the same side. In this case, I'm going to subtract 3x because I got this other number over here. If I do something to one side, I do it to the other side, minus 3x. My new equation looks like this. 5 and 3 are both negative. That would be negative 8x equals 16. I would divide by negative 8, divide by negative 8, and my answer is 16 divided by negative 8. What's that going to be? 17. 4s minus 3, in parentheses, minus 2s minus 6 equals 9. Solve for s. To do this, we want to get s by itself. Whenever I have this minus sign here, it can mean that this is a negative 1 that's being multiplied, or you can look at it as a way in which it's being distributed. So that's multiplied here and here. If you do that, it changes the sign of each of the numbers in the expression. I'm going to do two things at once. I'm going to do that distributive property, and then I'm going to put those like terms together. So here I've got 4s, and I got negative 1 multiplied by this negative value here. That's going to turn that into a positive 2. So you'd have 4s plus 2s. When you've got negative 1 times 3, that would be negative 3. You've got a minus 6 right here equals 9. Negative 3 and negative 6 would go together to be negative 9. 4s and 2s would go together to be 6s. That would equal 9. I'd add 9 to both sides. Add 9 to both sides. Here's what my equation looks like. 6x equals 18. Divide by 6. Divide by 6. S equals what? 18 divided by 6 is going to be my answer right here. For number 18, it says solve. 7 equals negative 12x minus 3 for x. Anytime that we're solving this, you're probably catching on to the pattern. We're getting rid of all the other terms or numbers next to the variable, get that variable by itself by using our opposite operations or our properties of equality. Here, I've got 12x minus 3. We work backwards, add 3 to both sides. 7 plus 3 is 10. My new expression looks like this. I would then divide by negative 12 to get rid of the 12 on this side. If I do something to one side, I do it to the other. Divide by negative 12 on this side, 10 divided by negative 12. What does that equal? I can reduce that into the simplest form. It's still going to be negative, but what would both of those divide by? 19. Solve 3/4 minus a equals 1/10 for a. Get a by itself. To do so, you've got to get rid of this 3/4. I would subtract 3/4. Subtract 3/4, you've got 1/10 minus 3/4. In order to do that subtraction, you need to have a like term. Terms that are going to be the same, or denominators that are going to be the same between those are going to be 20. So I'm going to turn 1/10 into something out of 20. Multiply by 2 times 2, that would be 2 out of 20. 3/4, turn that into 20 times 5 times 5. I multiply by the same thing in the numerator and denominator. 4 times 5 is 20. 3 times 5 is 15. And now if I would subtract those values, 2/20 minus 15/20 is going to give me negative 13/20. And now I have a negative a value equaling negative 13/20. So if I cancel both of the negatives, then positive a actually equals 13/20. Number 20. At the video store, movie rentals are $4, game rentals are $6. Let x be the number of movies, let y be the number of games rented. The equation 4x plus 6y equals 240 shows that the store made $240 renting movies and games. Find the intercepts and explain what each means. Well, to find the intercepts in an equation like this, we simply set the equation equal to 0 two different times. 4 times 0 plus 6y equals 240. If I set this equal to 0, I'm looking for the y-intercept, right? This would actually cancel out. I'd get 6y equals 240. Divide by 6, divide by 6. 240 divided by 6 is going to give me 40. Y equals 40. The y-intercept is at 40. Now we do the whole thing again, except we set the y to 0. So this would be 4x plus 6 times 0 equals 240. That would cancel. Divide by 4. Divide by 4. 24 divided by 4, or 240 divided by 4 is going to give us 60. What does that actually mean? Well, if you've got two scenarios here where there's intercepts of x and y for the amount of money that's made, you're looking at the extremes between what the actual rentals might be. It's not like there's going to actually be this case, but here's what these mean. The x-intercept shows that if no games were rented, 60 movies were rented. The y-intercept shows that if no movies were rented, 40 games were rented, where we're probably in the reality of saying that there were somewhere in between there because they made the $240. But mathematically, technically, that could be true. We're not given any more of that information. We just figured out what it means. That wraps up our completion of Cumulative Test 9B. Thanks for following along and filling in those answers with me as we work through how to solve each of those with our different procedures and skills. Obviously, the ones that Mr. Shane didn't fill in, he left for you to put in that work on your own. God's blessings.